Okay. Hello, Marie. So great to connect with you today for our conversation. We've been in touch for a while now. I've been following your posts about learning, and it's always great to have a chat with you about creating learning cultures and how can companies do this better. And uh, I've just been reading one of your articles about learning, and there's so much to learn from your journey as a people manager, from the journey of your company, Learnerbly, in what sort of things you're doing, and I really look forward to our conversation today.
Thanks. It's great to be here. I must say, I'm very pleased that you've been able to contribute to learning culture as well by delivering coaching training internally for Learnerbly's managers. It's been really valuable. Thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me today.
Yeah. Thank you. And for the benefit of our listeners today, would you like to tell a little bit about yourself and what do you do?
Yeah, of course. So I am People Operations Manager at Learnerbly. So Learnerbly is a workplace learning platform, and everyone learns differently. So we're a marketplace, but for learning and development. So we help progressive companies like Treatwell, WeTransfer, and Bulb to increase learning engagement to like 60% monthly, and put their people really in the driver's seat through personal learning budgets and curated content, whilst the Learnerbly people handle all of the admin. What I do there at Learnerbly is I'm people operations manager. So I'm responsible for embedding the Learnerbly values across the employee experience, starting from before they even know about Learnerbly, all the way to the hiring process, onboarding process, internal training, learning and development, and offboarding as and when as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Marie. And as for me, my name is Pavel Golenistsev. I'm a founder and director of Business Purpose. I've created my company based on the realization that when most of us spend at least one third of our lives at work, we want to make sure that we have a good time when we're working. We want to make sure that we're having a fulfilling careers. So with that aim in mind, I use my experience as a corporate talent management consultant, someone who has worked with over 20 companies on their employee engagement and talent assessment strategies to make sure that businesses can engage, develop, and retain their best people and make sure that all the people that they have can work at their best and be at their best and feel amazing with what they do. And I think specifically for our conversation today, Marie, it's very interesting for me as a business psychologist to hear about uh, your journey, your company's journey, and what your company does to support businesses with their learning culture. We had this very insightful chat the other day that there are different steps to starting learning, and there are and it's important to understand why learning is important at first and what can companies sort of focus on to really begin on their journey. Could you share a few insights with us, please?
Yeah, I'd love to. So, in chronological order, really, and a learning culture and learning, generally speaking, is absolutely key to attract and then nurture and then retain top talent, hire the right people, and enable them to consistently be challenged and stimulated and fulfilled, and engage with their work as well as just be curious, and it's also leading to a culture of innovation, and things that we'll probably touch back about later, around trial and error and the importance of just having room to experiment, generally speaking. But all of that, I think, can only happen, whether it's, like nurturing and developing, if people are feeling psychologically safe in the business that they're evolving in. And I think psychological safety is something that you're probably more familiar in the wording than I would be.
Uh, yep, Marie, you're mentioning very important points there. First off, what you say about the idea of attracting, nurturing, engaging, developing people, that makes perfect sense. In my experience, having worked with many companies on their employee engagement surveys, uh, I've actually seen it in the data for medium-sized companies, for large companies, for all sorts of businesses, that very often we see the question that says something like, I have opportunities for growth and development in this team, or my manager gives me those opportunities, or I feel enabled to do my work, and the learning in this company is generally great. This is something that has a lot of effect on engagement. When we run correlation analysis, when we look at the data, we see that for people it's so important to have those opportunities for learning, for developing, for knowing that they can grow while they are in that role. And of course, all of us, we sort of have different ambitions, different things that are important for us, and that's fine. But it's so important that a business can give opportunities for different people to grow at their own pace and according to their own preferred style for learning, for development. And something that you mentioned there, Marie, about psychological safety, yes, that's incredibly important, because one, we want to make sure that we can learn, we can develop in our role as much as we'd like to. And two, we want to make sure that this learning, developing that we're doing, we can play with ideas, we can play with concepts, we can try different things. We have different sources of learning. I can try this, I can try that. That's in a way, that's how creativity, that's how innovation happens, when we are enabled to grow, to play, to develop, while at the same time there's a structured approach where we can learn in the way that really works for us, and the different ways to learn at different points on our learning journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also important to remember that this is a totally mutually beneficial dynamic for both the person who works at the company and the business itself, because the person will be stimulated, they will be challenged, and then they will be able to apply those learnings at work and apply those newly acquired capabilities at work as well. So beyond just retaining these employees, there's also really an aspect of when you give people the freedom to learn and to try and to iterate on things, then you're gonna unlock some resources as well within them. So some growth suggestions, some projects that you might not have thought about, and it's really igniting for collaboration.
Yeah, that makes very good sense. It's that sort of, when we get an opportunity to explore in this way, to get new ideas, that's how new connections form, that's how we can come up with new ideas, that's how we can it is helpful for individuals, and it is helpful for businesses know clearly what sort of things we know, what sort of things we don't know that we know, what sort of things we now know that we didn't know before. And that's what's creating this sort of aha moments that foster creativity, innovation, and that make everyone that little bit more excited about coming to the office, or they're linking on the Zoom call this year rather, and just enjoying their experience of being, of innovating, of coming up with new ideas, while also feeling that they are growing, not just as an employee of a company, but also as a human being and as a professional on their own.
Yeah, and it's a very exciting journey to learn, and you want to apply your learnings at work. And the more you're going to apply and learnings that you're excited about, the more you're going to be, performing also for the benefit of the business.
Yeah, Absolutely. And with I know from our previous conversations, from the stuff that you share on LinkedIn, through your articles, that Learnerbly has a very strong learning culture itself. Like, it lives and breathes learning, and a lot of its culture is based on the idea. Can you share with our listeners what what sort of things really work for companies that want to begin creating this more of this learning culture, and also sustaining it over years as they're growing?
So I think I might give a disappointing answer if I say that, which I will, which I do, which is that there is no one size fits all. That's exactly the point of, you know, a bottom-up self-served service of learning and development like Learnerbly. So what I have is rather steps that can be taken, that
Mhm.
can be applied to any business, so that you as the people or the learning and development person can understand what fits your people and what works with your culture, which is also the work that the customer success team does at Learnerbly, enabling our clients to build their own learning cultures, of which Learnerbly plays, you know, a central part, but it has to be embedded into a broader culture piece in order to really stick and drive engagement and have a long-term positive impact. So first things first, we've covered psychological safety, we've covered knowing why the business might want to be involved in building a learning culture and driving it as well. I think next would be understanding what you're working with at the moment. So whatever your business is, whatever it is you do, you're working with some form of reality that is, I'm stealing this from you, Pavel, neutral. I think it's important to understand what the status quo is, map it out, and you don't need to know it to start with. You could just ask people, because that reality being neutral is also composed of everyone who's involved's perspective. So your understanding of what the status quo is isn't the entirety of it. So mapping out using feedback tools. I think the shorter the feedback loop, the better. And for instance, when we revamped learning and development offering at Learnerbly in the first place, it was a mix of in-person chats, because we still had an office back then. It was a mix of structured surveys, a mix of, you know, what was the metrics saying around the learning and development poll, because we were already using a free tool that's called Office Vibes. And so with these different modalities of gathering feedback of different people who have different perspectives, then we were able to have a clear understanding of, okay, what's been tried before? What worked, what didn't, why, what kind of stuff sticks around with the people that are part of Learnerbly, the people that are Learnerbly. And through this, we sort of figured out a few themes, and we were able to kick off the planning of the works, really.
uh, that makes such a good sense to me. I remember from some of your writings, you mentioned the importance of having this minimum viable product for creating a learning culture, for creating a habit of learning. And it would be great to hear a bit more about it. But something else that I think is really interesting is when we talk about that idea of uh, iteration, that idea of sort of trial and testing and finding out what really works for a company and also for every single team and individual within the business. It's really important to be listening, to be understanding, whether it's through surveys, and there are lots of great survey platforms for that, whether it's through perhaps interviews, through informal chat, one-on-ones, focus groups, but it's understanding what sort of things really work for people, because we are all different, all of us, like learning in our own individual way. And you mentioned there this idea that reality is neutral. Yes, reality is neutral. And what really happens is that we sort of paint it with our own perception in different ways, and everyone does it based on their personal experiences, their personal beliefs and preferences. And some of us prefer to learn in one way, some in another. Some may say that's the best idea ever. Others, that's just not how I learn. I'm not sure why you do this. But finding a mixture is what's really important, and making sure that as part of a learning culture, there is some sort of integrated framework, a system of sorts that brings together different elements, different forms of learning content that can cater to individual needs, and understanding and making sure that people in the company, on the team, know that this content is out there and what's their preferred learning style and what's the best way to learn. Because big part of learning is actually knowing how to learn effectively, and that's a whole different question. But there's so much out there. What do you think?
I think that it's as important to have a multiplicity of perspectives on what constitutes the status quo as it is for a people operations person to have access to a different variety of data. So a mix of metrics. So we had that in Office Vibe with the NPS around learning and development. A mix of qualitative data, which would be rather the informal chats, and the quantitative data, which you can gather quite easily with a survey, and you can also add some gifts in there, which is always good fun. I think maybe more for me even than the people who answer the survey. And then with that information, a framework which I came across relatively recently, or started working with relatively recently because of the remote nature of our current workplace. So I haven't tried it with implementing the learning culture, but I think it still applies, is the jobs to be done methodology. So it's a bit techie, but essentially the idea is that every service that you provide is a form of product. And so you can't have an informal coffee chat because you can't bump into people. But what you can do instead is use user interview methodologies, which are used in product development, with your people, because at the end of the day, the people experience that you're providing is a form of product. And so the users are the people, and you want to gather qualitative insights. And then the jobs to be done framework is one amongst many others, but one means of data classification when you're working with qualitative information as well. Hope that makes sense.
I think it definitely does. You, what I'm hearing there that I think is incredibly valuable is this idea of connecting different forms of knowledge and having this sort of, I guess, multidisciplinary approach to knowledge when, thanks to learning, like learning helps us to create those new neural pathways. It helps us to understand different concepts better. Like by understanding mathematics better, we can understand like other sciences better. And I guess by understanding linguistics, we can understand computer programming better, or something like that. But it really does make sense to sort of bring, when we learn more, when we expand our knowledge, coming back to the idea of creativity and innovation, we can innovate more, we can create more, we can form connections between things better. It's like this idea of that one of the definitions of wisdom is being able to form connections between concepts that may seem unrelated at first. And I think that really makes sense. And that's what makes people really enjoy the learning process. It's knowing that, oh, I don't know how it works, but I'm aware of my not knowing, and I know where I can take a look. Or I don't know how it works, but I know how this thing works. So I'm going to tweak, I'm going to experiment, I'm going to build that minimum viable product, see what happens. And so learning isn't just about sort of a journey from A to B, but it's I guess what I'm trying to say is that when we talk about a learning journey, it's not really like a journey between like point A to point B, but it's like from point A towards the stars, towards this multitude, like a universe of different
Definitely
connections.
would take a 4D graph, yeah.
Yeah, but I think that really makes sense. Like by learning one thing, we're not actually just learning that one thing. We are getting access to so many more ideas, and that's really the pleasure of learning and the great benefit of it for individuals and for businesses. And Maria, on this note, I think it would be really interesting to discuss about like what sort of quick wins can companies implement as they are at different stages in their learning journey, and perhaps what are some of the sort of the universal truths, something that businesses, that other talent leaders, people leaders, operations professionals out there really want to take on board to implement changes right now or to support their current initiatives.
Totally. I really like the quick wins part of the title because it's very much aligned with applying the lean startup methodology, which is having very short iteration cycles. Essentially, you don't need to work harder, just work smarter. What's the least possible you can do to get information about what you can do better. And then you do that and you repeat in very small cycles. So instead of having a growth curve that's like this, it's going to look like this. Boop, 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 boop. And you're welcome about the little sounds. And so my best advice, which I did not apply, we didn't apply, and you know, reflecting on how we did the first iteration of revamping our learning and development offering, we went through the classic, you know, pitfall of we're going to offer a very broad thing and everything needs to be perfect. And truth is, well, that's a universal truth for you. If you give too much to chew, then people are not going to know where to start. Your engagement rate is going to drop a little bit. Whereas if you start by launching one initiative or maybe 3 initiatives, so you have a little bit of multimodality, then you'll have enough time and enough energy to really drive engagement on each of those personally by sending direct messages to people, asking them, hey, we want to run a lunch and learn. I know that you love to read about the Tudors. Would you be interested in doing a lunch and learn about the Tudors, you know, or whatever it may be? That's not a very techie example, but and repeating once there's good engagement on those and they're taken for granted, once they're woven within the fabric of what's a normal day at Learnerbly. Well, a normal day, there could be a lunch and learn, you know, there was one a couple of weeks ago, so it's part of the new normal, sorry to use this buzzword, and then people will have enough mind space to welcome a new initiative, and then they will have even more likelihood of engaging with that new initiative if you've shown in the past through how you've iterated on the first things that you launched that you were gathering feedback through short loops, and that you were iterating on the learning and development offering based on what people said they needed and they wanted, and informed by the sort of positive impact that it's had or lack thereof. It's okay that stuff doesn't stick. Like, sometimes it just doesn't work. If anything, it's giving you information on maybe what you need to do to pivot instead of persevere. And that's just equally valuable.
Yeah, Marie, there's so much wisdom in this. It's like this very basic idea that it's so easy to forget when we're trying to implement a big change, is that people can't chew when there's just like so much out there and you need to provide it in small chunks.
Baby steps are the best.
Yeah, and that's exactly like what I've seen with when a large organization runs its people survey, for example, and they try to see like, okay, there's so much we can do, and we try to do all those 10 and 20 different things and action points in 1 year or 1 month and nothing happens, and they think like, oh no, there's something wrong with us, but you should just focus on 2 or 3, and that's the best possible advice. And same with
Yeah,
learning.
exactly, because it allows you to really move faster. And, like at Learnerbly, we grew from essentially 10 to 30 people within 12 months. And half of this was during COVID at the same time as we were transitioning to full remote. But that influences, how people engage with the learning and development offering. If you plan it for 6 months, but during those 6 months, your company changes a lot, or the world changes because there's a global pandemic that just, comes out of the blue. If you're working with really short iteration cycles, it's so easy to sort of wiggle or just re-gear, make changes. Whereas if it's this big project that's like so beautiful, so satisfying to dream of, and you're spending 6 months to work on it, well, if 4 months in something changes, you're going to have to start from scratch. That's going to be frustrating. You're not even going to be able to necessarily know where you could have tweaked this or that could have potentially stuck around if you'd launched it when it was, the minimum version of itself. So I think, yeah, it's also really good for resilience, generally speaking, as a business.
Yeah, absolutely. This idea of like, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what sort of changes will happen. We need to be able to iterate quickly. We need to be able to come up with new ways and changing things, because like we didn't know what 2020 was going to bring us. We don't know what the years ahead will bring us. I think this is such an impressive, inspiring story of Learnerbly growing so quickly during the pandemic. You bringing on board lots of people and really keeping your culture strong. Can you share a little bit? I'm sure our listeners would love to hear, like, what have you been doing to make this happen? Like, I'm guessing there is no secret, but what has really worked for your company, for you as an operations manager, and what was the role of learning in making it work for your remote teams?
Yeah, well, actually, I'm going to use a cheat sheet and I'm going to put a document up which might be of interest to people who've been listening this far. And it is Learnerbly's employee guide, which is hyperlinked on our website from the About Us tab. It's a free public document, and there's a recap of everything that we do that constitutes our learning and development offering. I've just put it up on my phone here.
Yeah, I'll share the link with the recording. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And I've put it up because it's quite broad now. I've been at Learnerbly for 2.5 years, and we've had a lot of time to add, I don't know how you say this in English, add bricks to the wall. And the things that have helped, I mean, first off, everything that's in this list of things that we offer, we haven't had to make that many changes in making it work remotely. I think the biggest change was probably that we used to host lunch and learns, which are voluntary, non-business critical learning talks, employee-led, which we used to have over lunch hour, and then everyone would just grab a sandwich or something and meet up in the room, and it would be this interactive session where people would be eating and the presenter would be, presenting. And now that we're full remote, Zoom fatigue is a real thing. Like, thanks for bearing with us for an hour when you could be staring at a wall instead. Zoom fatigue is real. And also lunch hour. I mean, I'm French person. I'm going to use a big stereotype here. You shouldn't have lunch at your desk. You're missing out on the taste of your food. And so we've decided that it might be better to perhaps, tailor this initiative and rename it Coffee and Learn, and have it instead outside of lunch hours. Because especially at the beginning during lockdown, so we were already flexible, and we increased the flexibility of our hours and just how we navigate work. so that people could go for, if you needed a 2-hour walk at lunch because, you know, it's March and you're locked inside and the sun is gone after 4 p.m. and you finish work at 6. Like, yeah, so that sort of flexibility has been really, really helpful, giving, you know, protecting people's personal hours. So no lunch and learn before 9 a.m. because I'm still having coffee. And that's okay. It doesn't mean I'm not professional. It doesn't mean I'm not, you know, it's not about output, it's about outcomes. And if you're impact focused and you have a trusting culture, then it's gonna, well, I'm just digressing now. Another thing that's been really helpful is recording, like we're doing right now. So I'm just starting to do this, but the compulsory trainings like GDPR, all the stuff we love, those are going to be, or are being recorded so that people can access them asynchronously. There are still live sessions because the value that's in there is, it can be for Q&A, it can be because it's a refresher and you don't necessarily want to watch the same video 10 times in a row. So a good balance of the interpersonal aspect, maybe more of a conversational workshop type of format when it's synchronous, and then when it's just commenting on slides, then asynchronous is doing the trick just as well. That's one other thing for remote. And also remote brings about the question of transparency more. So I think I touched on trust a little bit earlier. And we noticed, so Learnerbly already had an initiative called Learning Leave, where you can go to a conference and use your learning leave and it's not deducted from your annual allowance, annual leave allowance. But we noticed a trend that essentially correlated confidence with making time for learning on the job, I mean. And so we put in place a protected learning hour so that you can have that sort of, you know, official stamp that it's okay to do that, which initially actually started with, I was having a conversation with a colleague of mine and she said, oh, I need to learn more about how to operate Excel, but I'm going to do it tomorrow. And I was like, girl, tomorrow's Saturday. Of course, you're welcome to learn on a weekend, but this is a specific type of formula that you need to be more fluent at in order to do your job. If you do it on the job with the real data, you're going to have more time to learn and you're going to have more, like, you're going to, more exercises, you know, more opportunities to play around. And you're not alone, like you can ask other people to make sure that everything is correct so that we don't ship erratic spreadsheets out. But yeah, it's an opportunity. It's not, you don't have to suffer to be productive. It took me a long time to understand that.
You don't have to suffer to be productive.
Yeah, you can be learning and having fun at the same time and be productive and have fantastic outcome with, you know, smarter output, which is in shorter iteration cycles.
Yeah. Oh, Marie, there's just so much information, so much wisdom, so much great stuff out there that you've shared with us today. Thank you so much for having this conversation and for talking about the learning culture. Can you tell how can our listeners get in touch with you if they'd like to hear about your experience with Learnerbly and as a people operations manager?
Yeah, of course. So for Learnerbly, our website is, well, it's spelled out here. I can actually spell it from memory, which is quite impressive, I find, which is, yeah, learnerbly.com. You can, you know, book demos on there on LinkedIn. We're also on LinkedIn as Learnerbly. You can find me on LinkedIn. Pavel, you've put the link here. It's just Marie Krebs. And also, if you're a people operations person looking for support and to build and implement a learning culture and you'd like support from peers And that's why you're looking for this type of content. There is a community out there called People Stories, which I co-founded, and we're trying to bring the status quo of what progressive means forward together as a group, because we're smarter together and no one's here to reinvent the wheel. We just want it to go further, faster, better, and have fun with random gifts on the way.
Thanks so much, Marie. I'll make sure to add a link to People Stories community, and being a part of that community myself, I can confirm for everyone who needs some support with an HR leader, an operations manager. It's just such a great supportive online community place with over 200 participants right now, where people are so generous sharing their advice and insights. It's really a great place especially if you're part of a, I guess, more startup or scale up and are looking for those additional insights. But there is lots of wisdom and learning for everyone. A little bit about me. If you'd like to get in touch with me, you can do so through LinkedIn or through my website, businesspurposecoaching.com. Right now, I'm offering a training for growing companies to help their managers make sure that they have the right skills to be great coaches and know how to have conversations about performance and well-being with their teams. And thank you everyone for listening. Marie, thank you so much for your time and
Thank you
sharing
so
the
much for
insights.
having me. It's been great fun.
Thank you. Bye.